Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Just wrapped up talking some LA Lakers and LeBron news. We're now going to be shifting gears a bit to one of the other teams that were playing last night in the New York Knicks, who have last night they completed a 15-point comeback against the Indiana Pacers. Spoiled the little Obi Toppin revenge game going on there, and they come back and win their 9th straight game. That is now tied for the longest win streak in the NBA this season, and they're really firing on all cylinders right now. And specifically with that, their now recently announced All-Star Jalen Brunson has really been firing on all cylinders. He scores 40 points in the win last night, shooting 50%. He was incredible, as he has been plenty of times this season for the Knicks, especially given the fact that Julius Randle is down with an injury, and he has been able to help keep them afloat during this run. Brunson in this win streak is averaging 32.6 points per game, and last night there was a very cool moment after the game where playing this game in Madison Square Garden, and after coming back to beat the Pacers, he is the post-game interview on the court, and he's standing there as MVP chants from MSG are raining down on him, and he is being asked by a reporter about how he feels and like what it means to him to be named to his first All-Star game. He was getting emotional, and it's just you can definitely see, and the Knicks fans in my life have made it very clear, the relationship between them and Jalen Brunson is very strong. This is the first All-Star point guard that the Knicks have had since ages before I was born. It was maybe 80s. It was like Anthony or something. I'm totally blanking on it. This is a bad job on my part trying to do a spontaneous history lesson from a time that I was not born. But this is a big revelation for the New York Knicks, is just how good Jalen Brunson has been for them. Obviously, you can go back to when they first made the decision to sign him. So many people were calling it an overpay, and in turn, he has developed into one of the best, one of the most reliable guards in the country. And I think that he has really been the catalyst. Julius Randle, you can definitely argue, I know it's maybe a little unpopular, you can argue that Julius Randle is the more talented player than Jalen Brunson is. It's just sort of a matter of heart with him. And that is something that Jalen Brunson excels in, is having that heart. He has just been the motor to keep this thing going. I actually love the dynamic that he and the other Villanova players on the team have with one another. It was him, Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo. DiVincenzo, by the way, has been phenomenal. Just on and it's Ryan Arcidiacono as well as the other Villanova. Before I get too off topic here, like their Villanova championship team connection is really fun to see. It's kind of infectious. But quickly on the note of DiVincenzo, there was a lot of talk about the Knicks when they made this trade for OG Anunoby, that giving up Emmanuel quickly, there was kind of a gap there of who was going to be playing the backup guard position for them, because it had been Quickly, who was in Sixth Man of the Year talks the year prior and was probably headed on his way to a similar conversation at least this season. And instead, it's been DiVincenzo, who has been incredible for them, has had a couple 30-point games. He's really taken his game to another level. And then actually Deuce McBride has been very good as well. He's just sort of a spark plug guy that comes off the bench for them, is a very solid scorer, and they've just sort of patched that hole together with guys that were already in the building, which is nice. Malachi Flynn, who they also acquired in that deal, he was getting some playing time for them last night. I don't anticipate him necessarily getting these playoff minutes, but on the note of playoffs, that sort of brings me into the bigger picture conversation here with the Knicks, and that is, are the New York Knicks contenders for this year's NBA Finals? I think that you have to give them tons of credit for the level of defense that they have put out there. From the start of the season, they've been good, but since making this OG Anunoby trade, they have been incredible. He has helped to elevate them. I mean, he guards 1 through 5. He's been great. And keep in mind, with some of the big man injuries that they've dealt with, they've been missing Mitchell Robinson for a significant amount of time. Isaiah Hartenstein has been sort of in and out of the lineups. And Anunoby has just been such a lockdown guy for him. And that's where 4 first-round picks, like it was being reported on last year that were being offered for him, I thought that that was a lot. But come back to this year where you're trading an RJ Barrett who definitely has potential, but with the lack of consistency in him, and Emmanuel Quickley, who also has a little bit of inconsistency stuff and just isn't the level of defender, I thought this was a good deal for them. That Anunoby, he can't fully be appreciated in the NBA fandom world when he's playing on sort of a middling team, because he's just one of those perfect guys. It almost reminds me somewhat similar situations, but not quite, because I think that Anunoby's the better player, and in the past he was on better teams. But he sort of feels like he fits into that Aaron Gordon role, where Gordon showed that he had a lot of skill on the Orlando Magic when he was coming up in his early years, but he just was never going to be the number one guy. And OG, I think that ever since coming into the league, maybe very briefly at the beginning of his career, you were thinking, okay, well, could this guy actually be more of an alpha dog? But just the lack of shot creation, really, and the deep offensive bag. He's good at what he's good at on offense, and that's what you need, because his defense is just that elite. And that sort of player doesn't really get rewarded when you're on a middling team, such as when Aaron Gordon was on the Magic. And again, it's not a perfect comparison. I'm coming up with this off the top of my head, but I think that he is an excellent third best player to have on your team, and he really does give them that point of attack defense that they need. It's not that Jalen Brunson's necessarily a liability on defense, but he's not really going to shut down an all-star point guard on the other end. Anunoby can shut down an all-star point guard, an all-star forward, and if you ever need him to sort of play up in size, like you look across the Eastern Conference and some of these teams that they're going to be competing with, you have the likes of big size with the Boston Celtics, who maybe they start Kristaps Porzingis at the 4-1 game if they're starting Horford at the 5, and they try and overwhelm you with size. And the Celtics 1 through 5 have size as it is. The Bucks with Giannis and Brook Lopez, you can stick Anunoby on them, and it's not like you're ever going to necessarily, when you're playing elite level scorers like that, be able to fully take them out of it. But I have full confidence in Anunoby to be able to step up to guard any of these bigger forwards, as well as I do with anybody in the NBA. So I think that that is such a huge plus for them. Now, as far as them contending this season, I mean, not in necessarily like a dark, cynical way, but whatever's going on with the 76ers and Joel Embiid, I think that that does sort of open up, potentially, if Embiid's not going to be fully healthy through the playoffs, that opens up more of a lane for them, because you have to worry about the Celtics, you have to worry about the Bucks. If Joel Embiid is playing, you have to worry about them. I know that the Miami Heat have been very bad during this regular season, but I mean, last year it was the 8th seeded Heat that knocked the Knicks out of the playoffs. I just don't think that you can ever overlook an Eric Spoelstra led team there, especially when you have a player there like Jimmy Butler, who he pretty much came into the year saying that he didn't really care at all about coming away with any of these regular season awards, and he's just looking for a championship. It's just somebody that I don't want to get in the way of. So I do think that there's a lot of talent in the Eastern Conference, and there may be a little bit on that second tier, but I think that at least the move for Anunoby was a very good move for them heading into next season. I think that it's helping them to build up the type of players that they want in order to bring home a championship. I mean, I wouldn't pick them. I definitely wouldn't pick them over the Celtics, and I'm curious. The Celtics and the Knicks have played a handful of times already this year, and the Celtics sort of handled them, but this is without the new version of the Knicks with OG Anunoby. Like I mentioned, this team is now the best defensive team in the NBA, and that's even without Mitchell Robinson. Since the start of 2024, they are first in the NBA in defensive rating, and I think that that's here to stay. And I don't anticipate, this is probably their least healthy stretch, knock on wood, but this is probably their least healthy stretch without having Julius Randle, without having Mitchell Robinson, and I think that it's going to say a lot the way that they keep themselves afloat here. But on the note of Julius Randle, he's somebody that has maybe even sometimes unfairly gotten criticism. Last year, he was playing through injuries when the playoffs came around, and he was not the fully healthy version of himself. But that being said, it's just sort of the mental stuff with him that I don't know if I can buy into him being a crucial part of your roster for an entire month straight. He can get a little bit diva-ish, and it seems like he gets along well with the players and everything that are on that team, and I don't think that it's any sort of a true locker room concern. It's just me as a viewer. I watch him, and sometimes the offense can directly translate to defense, which is good and bad at sometimes, and that's a tendency that a lot of NBA players have. But when Randle isn't getting calls, when he isn't getting the post-up touches that he likes, and he doesn't feel like he's being quite as utilized as he would prefer to on the offensive end, you can at times really see him with a lack of care on the defensive side. There have been a couple instances this year where he's just walking around on defense, even in the fourth quarter in close games, and there's no denying, I think, the talent that he has, but there is a certain level of and now he doesn't have to be the best guy on the team is the thing. I think that Brunson has showed that he has the type of leadership and, more importantly, the skill to lead them through a playoff run. But I just still have my doubts with Randle. He's been an All-NBA player in the past. He, depending on games played this year, could maybe find his way into an All-NBA team again this year. I do really hesitate with him because I don't know if you can fully count on him game in, game out again. But this has been a tremendous Knicks season, and I think that the NBA is better when the Knicks are good. That's something that me, as a 22-year-old, I haven't really fully been able to experience other than winning one round in 2013, I believe it was. But the Knicks seem like they are here to stay, and importantly, between Brunson and I'm going to specifically focus on Anunoby here, along with a handful of these guys that they have on the bench, I think that they are in a very good position to at least potentially compete this year. And even going into next season, I think that they have the foundation in place to stick around for a good while. So we are going to be taking one last final break here. When we come back on the other side, done a lot of NBA today. We are going to sort of switch gears a little bit to the NFL and talk about everyone's favorite New York Jets. So stick with us. We will be right back.